In Argentina, the ruling party backtracked the so-called Omnibus Bill, a key project for Milei's administration, and sent back to commissions as it was failing to reach consensus on key articles. Palestinian protesters gathered in front of the UNRWA in the West Bank city of Beidunia to decry funding cuts to the agency. And in France, the National Federation of Organic Agriculture mobilized to the seat of the National Assembly in rejection of what they describe as the government's abandonment of the agricultural sector. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos, and from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba, we begin with the news. In Argentina, the ruling party backtracked the so-called Omnibus Bill, a key project for Milei's administration, which was sent back to commissions as it was failing to reach consensus on key articles. This means that the mega bill presented by Milei loses last week's general approval and must go back to its initial debate. The decision was taken because Liberty Advances did not have the necessary votes to approve key articles of the law, such as the privatization of public companies, reform to the law on debt sustainability, and increased penalties to limit social protests. The project, which became known as the Omnibus Bill due to its extension, had already been trimmed to almost half from initial over 660 articles and was presented as one of the pillars of the administration together with the mega decree of emergency. Inside and outside the Congress, celebrations were held, including chants stating that Milei has no law.
What Freedom Advances did with its allies was to collapse the law. They collapsed. The laws are breached. We must generate dialogue, and above all, we must talk to those who have the consequences of the laws. Here there was a very pretentious vision of the government that was to delegate extraordinary exceptional powers.
In the same context, the deputy of the left from Alejandro denounced the measures that President Javier Milei is trying to impose.
The extortion has been going on for a long time on the part of the national government, not only for trying to stifle the resources of many provinces that depend on participation for almost 80% of their resources. We had denounced this situation, but also that the whole of this omnibus bill was not something isolated, but also had other branches. One of them is the measure launched by Caputo to devaluate, to inflate, to crush the salaries and the income of the workers. Another is the emergency decree, also the protocols of Patricia Bullrich to impede the right to protest. And the Omnibus Bill was the contrary of all that, and that generates an outrage to the working people, but also given the power of a monarch to Javier Milei. I think that this is a great defeat today.
For his part, the also deputy of the left front, Nicolás del Caño, indicated that his bloc has been denouncing the policies of Milei's government from the very beginning.
The project to come back to committee has to be dealt with again from scratch. The general vote is not invalidated as the article that had been approved in particular, and of course on account of a triumph the popular mobilization. Many who came here from different places that despite the fear and the fierce police repression, not only them but also your colleagues who were violated. The government tries to go against freedom of the press. The right to demonstrate is a triumph. It is a defeat for the government because of the consensus it couldn't reach with the governors and with other blocs who had been collaborating with the government. So the role we have been playing with the left is very important from the very first moment.
In other news, on Tuesday, Brazilian health authorities announced that at least 4 states are in public health emergency after registering an alarming outbreak of dengue. In this sense, the entity notified that more than 360,000 positive cases and 40 deaths have been registered. In this context, the government of the states of Acre, Minas Minas Gerais and Goiás, as well as the Federal District and the city of Rio de Janeiro, declared public health emergencies. On the other hand, the Minister of Health, Anicia Trinidad de Lima, explained that the increase in cases is due to the high temperatures and the increase in rainfall since the end of 2023. Among other measures, the government of Lula da Silva deployed massive dissemination campaigns and trained 12,000 professionals to involve them in the national monitoring and incorporate them into the public health system.
Right now, we have the prospect of the combat of virus 3, DENV3, which has not circulated since 2002. It is a virus that will affect a large and vulnerable population, so what we are doing is monitoring the mosquitoes and collecting them, as was done in the collection that you already recorded. There we can identify in advance if the mosquitoes are infected and the type of virus.
On Tuesday in Bolivia, President Luis Arce promulgated the transitory law for the judicial elections that was unanimously approved by the Senate chamber. The purpose of the law is to regulate the holding of judicial elections in the country, the pre-selection of candidates to the judicial body, and the plurinational constitutional court. In this sense, the law was promoted in the upper chamber and is made up of 42 articles, 5 additional provisions, and a final provision. It is worth noting that once the bill is enacted, the Constitution and Justice Commissions of both chambers must be organized to start the processes, taking care the deadlines of established respectively, so that the pre-selection process can be materialized immediately.
Today we enact a law, sister and brothers, that has a history since August 2023, since last year that could have been resolved and corrected these issues that were not at the time. We must remember that in August 2023, with dispensation of formalities law 144 is approved in the Senate chamber. They didn't want to accept their mistakes. They didn't want to accept the lack of capacity that some assembly members unfortunately have, perhaps under the influence to be able to realize that they wanted to make our deputies make a big mistake.
Protests continue in Haiti as the population demands the prompt departure of Prime Minister Ariel Henry. Thousands of people once again took to the streets of the national territory when the deadline for the swearing-in of a new head of state is about to expire. Citizens declare that during the demonstrations, the Haitian National Police used tear gas and bullets to repress the demonstrators, causing injuries to at least one of the civilians present. In addition to demanding the exit of the government, the protest denounced the high cost of living and the violence of armed groups that control the capital and other areas of the country. Now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Palestine, local media reported on Wednesday that the Israeli occupation army targeted a residential building in the southern Gaza Strip, wounding several people and killing 3 others, including a journalist and 2 women. In this regard, Palestinian authorities stressed that the shelling occurred on Tuesday night and it was aimed at a building housing around 200 displaced people in the Tel al-Sultan neighborhood west of the city of Rafah. The journalist killed was identified as Zakaria Abu Ghali, who worked for the Al Quds Today channel. It should be noted that among the wounded, there were displaced people from Khan Yunis who were seeking refuge from attacks by the occupation army. On the other hand, the Ministry of Health reported that since last October 7th, Israeli forces have killed 27,968 people, mostly children and women, while about 67,000 have been wounded. Also in Palestine on Tuesday, 5 members of the local Gaza police were killed in southern Gaza after their vehicle was hit by an Israeli drone attack while the law officers were patrolling the Kirbat al-Adad's neighborhood of Rafah. Precisely this attack by Tel Aviv regime forces comes within the framework of the escalation of military operations in Khan Yunis area, the second largest city in the Gaza Strip. And Palestinian protesters gathered on Wednesday in front of the office of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the West Bank city of Beit Dunia to decry funding cuts to the agency. Several countries suspended funding worth some $440 million, almost half of the agency's annual budget, after Israel's allegations that 12 employees of the aid agency known as UNRWA had allegedly participated in the October 7th attacks. 2 UN investigations are underway. UNRWA Commissioner General Filippi Lazzarini stated that the agency might cease operations in late February without more money. Among the 27 EU countries, several have suspended the funding.
We have come today here to reflect the mood of the Palestinian people that refuses the closure of UNRWA and believe that this decision is politically motivated, and we will not, as the refugees of Palestine, ever endorse a decision of this magnitude.
This Wednesday, the polling stations of Azerbaijan opened their doors for the presidential elections, in which the current president, Ilham Aliyev, is positioned as a great favorite. The president will seek re-election for a 5th term. Voters in Azerbaijan are casting their ballots for the first time since Aliyev army recaptured the Nagorno-Karabakh region after decades under Armenian control. On December 2023, the government announced a snap election for this February that was originally scheduled for 2025. Aliyev, who came to power in 2003, will face 6 other male candidates. The Azerbaijani Election Commission recently confirmed that voting will also take place in Nagorno-Karabakh and other areas of the region ruled for almost 30 years by Armenian separatists. The city of Karachi is bracing itself for Pakistan's parliamentary elections, with heightened security measures deploying over 150,000 personnel to ensure a smooth voting process on Thursday. Other preparations across polling stations in Karachi were also underway, including the sorting of ballot boxes and finalizing registrations. However, many voters are disappointed and wondered if the balloting can bring any real change in a country marred in political struggles, a seemingly intractable economic crisis, and resurgent militancy. 44 political parties will compete on Thursday for a share of the 266 seats in the National Assembly or the lower house of parliament, with an additional 70 seats reserved for women and minorities. After the election, the new parliament will choose the country's next prime minister. If no party wins an outright majority, then the one with the biggest share of assembly seats can form a coalition government. Meanwhile, early on Wednesday, a suicide bombing in Pakistan's Balochistan province killed at least 25 people, while more than 40 were injured. The attack came just a day before the Pakistani elections. According to Officer Muhammad Ramsam of a police control center, the explosives were placed on a motorbike that exploded outside the election office of Asfan Yar Kakar, a regional independent candidate who will participate in the election process. Around 240 million Pakistanis are called to the polls on Thursday to participate in the general elections. And we have now a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and also share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The National Federation of Organic Agriculture of France, the FNAB, mobilizes to the seat of the National Assembly in rejection of what they describe as the government's abandonment of the agricultural sector. The federation called for the mobilizations on the ground that the government has forgotten this sector in its recent measures. The mobilized sector is calling on the authorities to take measures to help them cope with inflation, but also to review some of the environmental policies imposed in recent years. The farmers assure that this is a fight for their survival and that they will not stop until their demands are met. The FNAB was not at the center of the protest that rocked the country in the second half of January and forced Prime Minister Gabriel Attal to issue 3 packages of measures. In the same context, in Spain, thousands of farmers used tractors to block roads for the second straight day on Wednesday against cheaper imports and heavy regulation. Farmers gathered at dawn on dozens of roads snarling traffic, mainly in Andalusia in the south and in the northeastern region of Catalonia and Navarra in the north, according to the Spanish General Directorate for Road Traffic. Spain's 3 main agricultural unions, Asaja, COAG, and UPA, did not initiate the demonstrations, which began on Tuesday. These unions have planned other protests this week, including Thursdays in Salamanca in the northwest and Friday in the northern city of Bilbao. Angry farmers have been protesting across Europe over rising costs, high fuel prices, bureaucracy, and the environmental requirement in the EU's Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP, and its forthcoming Green Deal. On Wednesday, local media in the Democratic Republic of the Congo reported that the conflict between the M23 rebels and government forces is intensifying. In this sense, humanitarian sources confirm that days of unrest have left dozens of wounded and have increased tensions in Masisi, causing displacement and collapse in the health centers, which, according to a medical source in Sake, have received about 20 wounded, mostly civilians, and some of them serious, while another one in Minova reported that 30 cases of this type. Elsewhere, Army spokesman General Sylvain Ekenge told reporters that there had been heavy fighting for control of a section of the road linking Sake and Minova, a small town in neighboring South Kivu province. 2 North Kivu territories, Rutshuru and Masisi, have been mired in conflict since 2021 as rebels of the M23 movement clash with government troops. In Kenya, justice authorities charged the leader of the Kenyan sect for the murder of 191 children whose bodies were found buried in the Sakaola forest. The indictment issued by the Kenyan prosecution was directed against Paul Mackenzie, the leader of a religious sect who, together with 29 other alleged collaborators, persuaded at least 430 people to fast until they died, thus leading to the so-called Sakaola massacre. He is accused of terrorism, torture, cruelty to children, and manslaughter. We move on to other topics. In the Philippines, a landslide triggered by intense rains killed at least 5 people, while 31 were reported injured. The landslide occurred Tuesday night in a mining village in Davao de Oro province and trapped at least 20 people inside 2 buses. Provincial disaster official Edward Macabili said an earthquake struck the village shortly after the landslide, so the search for more survivors was halted at midnight when it became too dangerous and resumed at dawn. Authorities reported that it is unclear whether other miners or villagers were also affected, and for their safety, 285 families from Masara were evacuated. And let's go now to the baseball world. On Tuesday, the Caribbean Series held its sixth day of competition in the U.S. state of Florida with the presence of 7 Latin American nations. In this way, the Tiburones of La Guaira of Venezuela defeated the Federales of Chiriquí of Panama, guided by a home run by former MLB player Alcides Escobar. In this way, Venezuela assured its qualification to Thursday's semifinals, while the Panamanian team couldn't extend their winning streak to 5. In another game, the Naranjeros of Hermosillo from Mexico defeated the team representing Nicaragua and said goodbye to the event, leaving South Florida with a record of only 2 wins. In the last game, the Tigres of Licey of the Dominican Republic also secured their spot in the semifinals, beating Curaçao, who are now forced to win on Wednesday and wait other results as they do not control their fate. On Wednesday, the last day of first round will be played with the last triple header scheduled, with 1 spot to be filled for Thursday's semifinals. In this way, Criollos of Caguas will seek their qualification to the semifinals when they face Curaçao Suns. It should be noted that the Criollos achieved 5 championships in this type of event and have not won since 2018, while Curaçao seeks to reach its first final because they are a team that arrives as a guest to the Caribbean Series. In another game, Federales of Chiriquí from Panama will play against Tigres of Licey in a challenge between qualifiers that could have implications in the first or second feed on the verge of the semifinal Southern game. Finally, the day will close with the match between Tiburones of La Guaira and Gigantes of Rivas, where Nicaragua seeks to break a 6th losing streak, while Venezuela could guarantee the leadership of the standings with a victory. In the final day, with only 3 games left, there is still a lot to play, with the only exception of Nicaragua that will only play for pride. Looking ahead at the 2 games, this is how the Caribbean Series position standings looks like. In the sense, the Tiburones of La Guaira leads the standings after beating the undefeated Panama, and this way the Venezuelans control their fate as the first seed. Federales of Chiriquí stand in the 2nd place despite sleeping on Tuesday and are only looking for an opponent in the semifinals. As the 3rd place in the event, the Dominicans already gained the next round appearance and will be looking to improve their position. We continue in the standings with Los Criollos of Caguas, who will seek their presence in the semifinals if they can beat Curaçao, who is in the 5th place. Finally, Mexico finished 6th, while Nicaragua is only looking to save their honor and say goodbye with a 7th place, but at least with a win. On Thursday, a doubleheader semifinal will be held at Marlins Park, and the winner will meet on Friday's final. With less than 3 days remaining, the best is still to come. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.